Hello, in this video I want to talk about an eye for an eye and the roles that cognitive dissonance and trauma bonding and the hormones that they release during those processes play. It's a natural response, I believe, when you experience any form of hurt or being duped by someone, that you hope that they will experience something similar or be treated in a similar way, particularly when you're still hurting and in pain. Hello, I'm Elizabeth Goddard, author of Finding Lily and the A to Z of emotional abuse. And on this channel, I talk about healing from emotional abuse and divorcing both emotionally and physically from the abuser. If you're new to the channel, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're returning, thank you and welcome back. And thank you to all my new subscribers over the last few weeks and months. It's just been amazing. Thank you so much for your support. In this video, I want to talk about what and where the need for an eye for an eye comes from. Understand why you feel so hurt, why this hurt feels like physical pain, and how it can improve your quality of life. What it feels like to feel trapped, what keeps you trapped. Oh gosh, there's a lot here. And why it physically hurts you. And explain what transmuting that pain into something constructive means and what it looks like. Is it a natural response when you experience being hurt or duped by someone that you hope that they go through something similar or are treated in a similar way? And if you think about where it comes from, it might be through our DNA. When we've seen films and we read in our history books about wars or overcoming adverse conditions, Greek mythology is rife with stories of people being killed or doing the same thing or stealing something. You might be wondering when the emotional abuser is going to experience karma for the damage that they've caused to you. You might be actively willing it to happen, and you might be sitting around waiting for that moment. An eye for an eye is the law of retaliation. It's the principle that a person who has injured another person is to be penalised in a similar degree by the injured party. In softer interpretations, it means the victim receives the value of the injury in compensation. The intent behind the principle was to restrict compensation to the value of the loss. So the term lex talionis, I hope I've said that right, apologies if I haven't, does not always and only refer to literal eye for an eye codes of justice, but applies to the broader class of legal system that specifically formulate penalties for specific crimes, which are thought to be fitting with their severity. Some propose that this was at least part intended to prevent excessive punishment at the hands of either an avenging private party or the state. The most common expression of lex talionis is an eye for an eye, but more or other interpretations have been given as well. Legal codes allowing the principle have one thing in common: prescribed fitting counter of punishment for a felony. And the exact Latin to English translation of the phrase is the law of retaliation. The root principle of this law is to provide equal retribution. So when you look at it this way, is this really what you want? Caroline Myss describes the eye for an eye paradigm as outdated, and part of me agrees with her. So although from the other side I know the pain and the hormones that drive this emotion, and they are very real. Personally, I believe knowing what we know about wounds and trauma doesn't stop the programming. It's a conscious effort and understanding that gives you the courage, like Roberta in The Railway Children, to actually stand in front of a fast moving train and stop it in its tracks, waving a red flag. So the red flag is something that says danger and gives us a warning. What if you were able to recognise the emotion and stop them? Transmuting them from destructive to something constructive. And there's nothing that can compare to leaving an emotionally abusive relationship. The pain runs deeply into every cell and it physically hurts. The pain is very real. You feel like you're never going to recover from it and you're living in a nightmare. Everything you believed to be true is a lie, and your brain stopped working a long time before this moment to protect you. It's like having an entity living in your chest, which has the ability to draw you doubled in pain and to your knees. And it emanates deep within your soul. And although the hippocampus looks like a seahorse and has the name hippo, it actually acts like a crab, hiding away until the threat has gone. This abuse can leave you feeling confused and disorientated. In an attempt to preserve itself, the brain has this amazing ability to shut down so that no further damage can be made. Damage to the hippocampus can result in memory loss, and the stress caused by an emotionally abusive relationship triggers hormones such as cortisol, adrenaline, and noradrenaline. You can be functioning one moment and the next you can't breathe and tears are flowing from out of nowhere. The abuser's biggest fear was being abandoned, so they created strategies and scenarios to ensure they are in control and it wouldn't happen. And as you play back the relationship and how you got to this point, you realise that they tricked you. And you asked over and over again if they really did love you. Or was it all just a lie? And then you remember the good times you had. You remember being heard or acknowledged as a person. And then you realised that they were wearing a mask. And although they listened so intently to you, it was really for a reason. And you realised that they put you in a false sense of security. And what they were actually doing was bonding you. And you understand why. You understand why they moved the relationship so quickly and why you felt so connected and why you had so much in common. Then you question if they gaslit you, and you ask if you did really have trust issues or if your intuition was really wrong. And then you remember the good times you had. You remember being heard and acknowledged as a person. And then you realise they were wearing a mask. And although they listened so intently to you, it was really for a reason. You discovered how they manipulated you and turned everything into your fault. You realised that the triangulation was a way of making you jealous, and the discards you experienced were part of a game. They told you that you were crazy or paranoid when you started to question things. And then the cognitive dissonance swings back the other way, and you remember the good times you had together. And then you realise when they told you that you had trust issues and that you were too sensitive and that things were always your fault. This is a way of bonding you to them. They even made you question yourself about the relationship. And then you remember the good times you had together, and you know they would never do that to you. They told you you were the only person who understood them. And then you remember they told you that they think you're bipolar and that everyone thinks that you're crazy or insecure. And you're in this place and you're being told that the best thing you can do is to go and live your best life. And you're wondering, do these people not know what sort of pain you're in? Do they not know what has happened to you? And the answer to that is yes, they probably do. If they've experienced it themselves, they will understand the pain that you're experiencing. It will be their own version. I will put my hands up and say my trauma bond took over at times, and it was running my life. My trauma bond wanted to get back. My trauma bond kept me trapped in that eye for an eye. But at the same time, I could see where my old wounds were. And then I was able to track them down and heal. There was a gift in this as well. Cognitive dissonance is holding two opposing thought patterns at the same time. A lot of people use smoking as an example. Everyone knows it's bad for your health, but they still do it. Anyone who's experienced this in an emotionally abusive relationship will know what a bad example that is. Cognitive dissonance is traumatizing, and it's where your brain can't understand something. It's not computing. It's a bit like a small child asking the question, but why, over and over and over again. As a child, you may have been told or discovered that Father Christmas isn't real. You might have put your hands over your ears not wanting to hear this news. Or as you were growing up, you might have questioned if it was true, asking how reindeer fly or how he manages to buy or make all the presents. Or you might have challenged your parents who didn't hide the gifts very well. The child gradually understands and starts asking questions. Things don't make sense to them, and this is how they grow and understand why. You, on the other hand, were not given that. You might have asked questions, but you were told or given the answers, and when you went down that route of but why, you were told it was all your fault or that your intuition was wrong. It was the gaslighting. You were the problem. And even when you realised it was all over and they'd been lying and the programming was so deep and you got no closure, you still can't untangle from those thoughts. Your programming also included multiple discards where they came back and told you how amazing you were, how they got it all wrong, how they were sorry and they were never going to do that again. This was a pattern. So part of your brain may also be waiting for them to return. Your brain is still anaesthetized and hiding in its shell to protect itself, to protect what hasn't been damaged, and your hormones have you swinging backwards and forth. One moment you understand who they are and what they've done, and then the next you're questioning it, remembering all the good times and what a nice person they were. And as you manage to detangle from this and the trauma bonds, you might want them to experience karma or to seek some form of vengeance. And if you're going through a physical divorce with them, it's why it's healthier not to negotiate with them when you're still stuck. And when you are still stuck in that place that is remembering the good times, you will be hooked to the wounds that they showed you. They're damaged inner child. They told you about their awful childhood. And you might be tricked into allowing them to have whatever they want. And if you're at the other end of the spectrum, the polarity of this, you might be fighting for things that you don't even want, just to get even. And your emotions will swing like a pendulum back and forth when you tell your inner child or inner self that the person you thought they were doesn't exist. Part of you knows this to be true, and part of you will need proof. You have the proof. You just need to detangle from the trauma bond and keep yourself in your body. Divorcing emotionally from the abuser means that they no longer have control over you. Anytime that you hear from them or about them, there's nothing. At the end of the relationship, the pain was excruciating. The emotional pain is like physical pain. Anyone who's never experienced it will never fully understand what it's like. It's like trying to explain to a man what childbirth is like. Divorcing emotionally means there's nothing left. The pain has gone. The need for them to text you or send you a message or to reach out to you is gone. It's finally realizing who they are and what they do to people. It is understanding how you were manipulated and finally not trying to protect them or justify their behavior. Divorcing emotionally isn't about going no contact. It's about healing on a deep level. It's about breaking the trauma bonds and going deeper. It's about healing the original wound. You have to make sure your focus is on you and your healing. They won't want this. They want you to stay broken because when you're still in pain, you're much easier to manipulate. You offer them supply. You validate their fragile egos. The truth is they are very insecure, and the only way they feel whole and worthy is when they are in control of situations and of people. And during this cycle of abuse, they trained you to trust them over everybody else, including yourself. And you believed them. They saw you in a way that nobody else had seen you. And when they listened to you and questioned you, you believed that this was an interest in yourself. but it was really an interest in them. They were really interested in finding out what you could do for them, what you would be worth to them, what you would be prepared to give up or sacrifice for them. It will never be enough. They will always be looking for more. And once they've taken everything they can from you, they move on. They created a bond of trust and then they abused it. They created a fake future with you that they had no intention of living. They never meant for you to believe them, or that's what they say. They lie. They can't help it. The lies just roll off their tongue like the truth does to an empath. Everything is so different. They live in a fantasy world where they can do and say anything. They lead with their childhood wounds, play the victim, and tap into parts of you that want to heal or to nurture them. And gradually, like a bindweed, they take over your life, your finances, your hopes, your dreams. And when they've exhausted everything, they move on. Or they did that a long time before, but you hadn't realised. They created a chemical addiction, and it's this that's causing the pain. And so many people want to ignore it or pretend it isn't there, jumping into new relationships or into bed with a new partner, trying to hide it or to prove to themselves there's nothing wrong with them, they're not broken, and that they are worthy, lovable. It's like filling a gap or a gaping hole and trying to numb the pain. But this is short-lived. The pain will come back unless you are prepared to do the deep healing, to heal the wounds. Take the focus off them and transfer it onto yourself. You were fed with lies. You were manipulated into believing them. You were possibly a shell of your former self. I know I was. And everything you do and how you react is done via the stress hormones that are raging around your body like a pubescent teenager, unable to control themselves. Divorcing emotionally means none of this. The emotions aren't there and the trauma bond has been severed. There's no need for oversharing, to tell the world what they've done to you and to expose them for who they are. That feeling goes. The injustice of it all goes. The craving for them goes. The need to know what they're doing goes as well. You don't get the closure from them. You have to find it yourself. And you do. And you also cease to care what the flying monkeys are doing or saying about you. You realise that people aren't ready to hear who they are or what they're like. And you realise that over time, other people will be treated in exactly the same way and they will understand. Your emotions change to indifference. And if anyone approaches you and tells you anything about the abuser, you might find yourself saying, of course they are, or of course they did. Because you know what others don't. You woke up to their behaviour. This is a balancing act. You will go through a period of confusion, and the cognitive dissonance plays a huge part, and your mind, which is still being protected, allows you bits of information. You're trying to balance what happened with what you were told. And it is a gradual process. Too much information, and if you're not fully healed, you can spiral back down the hole or back into the shell. Anxiety and denial take over. You can't believe something to be true. So you go back to a place you perceive as happy and safe. And whilst you're computing all of this, you might also have the situation of the abuser moving on and playing happy families. And you're wondering, what is wrong with me? What did I do wrong? And this might go deeper than just this relationship, where there's an original wound that needs healing or a few of them. You might recognize these emotions. You've experienced them before, and you noticed them when you saw the red flags at the start of the relationship, but you might have believed their excuses and you drop your guard. You might have had a parent where you were walking on eggshells, or you were second guessing their moods to protect yourself and your siblings. And this is why the relationship is never quite unfamiliar. It's why it's so important that you do the inner work on yourself and track down the wounds. And with the trauma bond, when those cravings come up, to speak to it as if you would a child and ask it what it needs. I know it sounds a bit crazy, hello trauma bond, but it really does work. And it also helps to calm down your emotions and the thoughts and the needs that you have. You might want to give it a name. Remind yourself that the abuser wasn't a real person, they were playing a role. It's a bit like going out and seeing an actor that you know from a program or a soap and believing that they are actually the person they play. You can emotionally divorce. When you divorce emotionally, you're in a stronger position to say no. You're in a stronger position to make decisions that suit you and not them, especially if you're faced with divorce or if you have children and you need to co-parent. You're in a stronger position to get the divorce that works for you. You're also in a stronger position to spot their manipulation. You're in a stronger position to walk away if you so choose. And you're in a stronger position to call out their behaviour and stop it affecting you. And stuck in the trauma bond, your emotions swing from remembering who you thought they were to now realising who they are. And when this happens, you need to come into your own body and close down your mind and breathe through that, centering yourself and grounding yourself. The brain is probably not functioning and you're very probably battling with cognitive dissonance. So what you were told and what you believed and now what you're discovering. Your stress responses are on permanent alert. So by centering yourself and grounding, you can start to think a little clearer. And these triggers, flashbacks and cravings will start to calm down, but they are scary. And because of the damage, you don't know who you can trust. Trust your intuition. You aren't going to get closure from them. They will not take responsibility for their actions. So it's doubtful that you're going to get any proof from the abuser. So your feeling is the proof. Find a tribe who know how to support you through this. Set boundaries and make sure you stick with them. Check in with yourself and ask yourself how you're feeling. And make sure you implement self-care. You will no longer want an eye for an eye. You will no longer want to protect them. You will no longer want to be letting your wound lead you. You will be leading any negotiation if you're divorcing physically. I hope you found this useful. If you'd like to find out more ways of working with me, you can visit my website. I'll put the details below. I'll also put the links to both my books, Finding Lily and The A to Z of Emotional Abuse, along with the 2 free workbooks that I've got, Self-Care is Vital and Turn Broken into Your Superpower. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'm sending you loads and loads and loads of love.